and how to work in democracy with each other. And if we don't build in a democratic way, if we don't learn how to have democratic processes within our organizing, and also we don't learn how to have conflict resolution within our organizing, then our organizing is for naught. It's like building a house without a foundation that's strong. So one of the things that's important is in this process of organizing and coming together, as Alyssa had mentioned before, is like the process of like how we come together, establishing criteria and not replicating systems of oppression. Because one of the things that I noticed in this experience and many other experiences in organizing is that because of the society that we've been swimming in and the structures that we've been swimming in, more often than not, the organizing that's being done is reflective of the systems that we're breathing in and out of. Like when you're breathing in and out capitalism, when you're breathing in and out racism, when you're breathing in sexism and all these things, and you're also breathing in structural hierarchies that are not horizontal and vertical, where someone's at top and someone's making decisions, and it's not a collective process, that is unhealthy. And that's something that is important to learn from. These are learning opportunities. When crises happen, crisis is always an opportunity for learning, and conflict is also an opportunity for learning. And how we move forward through that is about developing a process. And that process of developing that community through that, it's a slow, difficult process. It's an uncomfortable process. But as a West African saying goes, those that want to go fast, go alone. And those that want to go far, they go together. And part of the problem with this process to begin with on an electoral place is that they're moving fast and they move without community. I want to just make note of the fact that I've been informed that the only reason they pulled this, well, one of the reasons they pulled it, as was mentioned, one of it is that if there was no resistance, power concedes nothing without a demand, as Frederick Douglass said. There was a public demand, and that public demand put pressure on them. But moreover than just that is the fact that they filed their application wrong, and they knew that if it was challenged in court because of the process that they negated, that they would lose in court. So they pulled it not because they're against it, not because there's public outcry, though those things influenced it. The reality is they pulled it because they knew there was a vulnerability. So what I've been told is that they pulled it for that reason, and there is still plans for them to move forward. It's not that they've had a change of heart. They didn't get enlightened. They didn't have like a moment of empathy and moment of concern for a community that's going through a housing crisis right now. What they're doing is they're basically covering their ass, and they realize they messed up and they're gonna file it again. So it is important to continue to move forward, as folks have said, and to organize. And part of it is about electoral policies, like who we have elected. Like if we have folks that are in office that are understanding of the fact that districts by nature are institutions that create gentrification and displacement and center power in the most powerful in the city and take power away from democracy. Which is something, yeah, for real, we should be ashamed of that. Like the fact of the matter is this is an undemocratic process, as much of what's happening in this city with the city elected officials, in particular this administration. They appreciate privatization and they privatize everything they can. And that means that, you know, the community is left out. I wrote a piece in after 2013 when they were planning another district in this community, and I started to push back around how that district would create displacement in our community and gentrification. And one of the common things I got was that, you know, that was unnecessary, it was a false reality. And here we are with a housing crisis where we've had the highest rent increases in the state for a few years. We have high eviction rates. I think we're number 3 or 4 on evictions in the state of Massachusetts. And the vulnerability of our community is at an all-time high. There's people, a lot of people I know that are housing insecure right now. There's folks I know that are working several jobs to keep and maintain a home with no actual change to their home except for the fact of the perceived value of their homes. And this is a piece called Where Do We Go? Where do we go when we can't afford the ghetto? From New Bedford to Soweto, historically segregated and hated, we are the blight they rewrite outside the margins, marginalized by institutional racism and real estate bargains. Yet if we speak of the oppression, hoping to reach and to teach lessons, we are seen as complainants that are less important, explaining our pain away as just some vain whiners. who don't take the time to define solutions. Well, how about not contributing to the uprooting of community? And what about solidarity and unity? Or listening to the voice of the voiceless, or not making the choice to ignore the impact of those made poor by the war on Black, brown, Moors, and natives? See, genocide and gentrification, they are so related, they are cousins, and white fragility, it has me bugging. It seems some are more upset about shame, blame, and guilt than the pain that is felt when the only place that oppressed people can claim is the prisons they built like concentration camps. As so-called allies stamp you as irresponsible and negative for speaking, trying to increase awareness. Guess fragility, it makes it hard for some to hear this. Seems so many are so asleep, they must have taken a sedative. And deep is the question, so it bears being repetitive. Where do you go when you can't afford the ghetto? Where do we go when you can't afford the ghetto? They've labeled our communities ghettos, which is a term that comes from Nazi Germany, for years. And they've divested from our communities, they've polluted our communities, they've exploited our communities.
Yeah.
They've underrepresented our communities.
Yeah.
And now the locations where our communities exist are target areas for development, for waterfront property. And as a result, over the last 50 years, we've seen Route 18 built through our community. We've seen drugs flooded into our community. We've seen hyper-policing of our community. We've seen people of our community be assassinated by police and get immunity from the city council, but from the mayor, from the police department, from the district attorney's office. And all of that leads to a flight from that community, where people in that community, for the sake of their children's well-being, seek to get out of, quote-unquote, the ghetto. But our community has never been a ghetto. It's always been a beautiful place. Even during the Great Depression, I learned from elders in my community that though they had nothing together. And they grew up with a community that had a community of care. And right now, we need to reestablish that community of care in our community, and we need to prevent further displacement, further erasure of our community. And that starts primarily with us undoing some of the stuff internally within ourselves. Yes. To unlearn the things that we've learned, and then learn how to have processes and learn how to actually put democracy in practice, because we haven't seen democracy in practice for the most part. I know I haven't, and I believe most of us haven't. And as a result of that, as we try to build an alternative, we're often structuring our alternative with processes that we learned in this sick society. So my hope is that people will go home and wherever you're at, and also do the work internally to figure out how do we learn how to work through conflict? How do we work to share power? How do we work to create systems where we galvanize our power collectively through a democratic process? And how do we force our city to instill these democratic processes? We should have participatory democracy in our city. We shouldn't be relying on every 2 years voting for people to get in office. Every time that something comes before the city, including the city budget, there's the opportunity for us as citizens to voice our opinion. And the only way that's gonna happen is through us organizing, educating, and pushing. So salute to everybody that's here, salute to everybody that's organized, salute to everybody that has struggled through this, through all the uncomfort that has happened, all the difficulty that has happened. Those are opportunities also for growth. Peace.
Yeah.